So great to see you today. Great to hear your message. Great to hear a lot of things. One thing I didn't really get to hear too much about, which is sleep. And I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into that because I think it's so important. I think for entrepreneurs, I know I personally struggle with this a lot. We always have this hustle, hustle, grind, grind, grind mentality. And the first thing that always goes is sleep.
For sure.
So you're a sleep coach. You've got a lot of sleep knowledge, a lot of sleep education. Why is it so important?
Yeah. Reason it's so important is it literally impacts every single physiological system. So it impacts every single system in your body. No system is untouched by sleep, either positively affected when you get it and the right amount and the right quality of it, or negatively affected when you don't get it. It literally is impacting every system. And one of the things I think gets underappreciated with sleep as well, and this is going to sound a bit cliche, but it impacts how you show up in your life. It impacts how you show up for the people that mean something in your life. We've all experienced if you're not getting the right quality or duration of sleep, you're more reactive with the people that you care about. You're less patient. You have less to give to them. Especially as an entrepreneur, you've got a limited cup to pour from to begin with. And then if you're not getting adequate sleep to offset that, you've got nothing left for your friends and your family. You've got nothing left. And so in addition to just all the research that we know from a physiological perspective, I really tend to get people to look at what can sleep and prioritizing sleep bring me in my personal life, bring for my relationships, bring for my friendships, bring for how I show up for my family.
And one thing that I've always heard is sleep hygiene, and why sleep hygiene is all so important and all that. What are two or three big or key things that you would tell people about their sleep hygiene to start to implement so that they can sleep a little bit better? Especially again, entrepreneurs, they're always stressed out, always thinking about all these different things.
Yeah.
How important is that, and what are one or two things you would recommend?
I tend to not use the term sleep hygiene or tend to look at it sleep hygiene. And the reason for that is these sleep hygiene lists that are out there, the top 10 sleep recommendations or the top 7 sleep recommendations. Those are always usually good things on those lists. There's good recommendations, but what I find is that it's not individualized and personalized to anyone. It's not individualized or personalized to you, what you need, what you struggle with. And I also find it's not really addressing the root cause of why a lot of people are struggling with sleep. And the root cause of why a lot of people are struggling with sleep, which doesn't get talked about a lot, is the relationship that you have with sleep, the behavior element around sleep. Have you lost your confidence in your ability to sleep? Have you created negative associations between your bed and your bedroom and bedtime as being triggers for being awake versus being asleep? What are just the overall thoughts and perceptions that you have around your sleep situation and your sleep ability? Because if you're somebody who's been struggling with sleep for a while, it's likely you don't have a great relationship with your sleep currently. It's likely that you don't have a lot of confidence in your ability to sleep, and that has to be the first place you start. Because if you don't address those things, even if you're playing around with lights and temperature and all these other sleep hygiene things or hacks, fundamentally the most important thing is always gonna hold you back. And so one of the ways to just really start and think about this or start to look into this is just writing down some of the thoughts and perceptions that you currently have around sleep. Just lay it out all on the table. And some of those things are just dramatization, some of those things are not true, some of those things we just are poor at self-estimating, but get all those things out on the table. List all those things and try to really take an honest look at those things and try to work on restructuring some of the negative connotations that you have around your sleep. If you're somebody who tells yourself, I'm a poor sleeper, I'm just destined to be a poor sleeper, that's just not the case, right? Even for people who have severe sleep disorders and have been struggling with sleep for 30 years, they can turn their sleep situation around. They can rewrite their sleep story. So the idea that you are just destined to be a poor sleeper is just not true. And there's literally nothing that backs that up. And so spending the time to rework your relationship with sleep and try to restructure some of the negative connotations that you might have around sleep is always the first place that I start with someone. The second is the associations that you build up around sleep. And this is so important. One of the things that ends up happening for a lot of people who struggle, if you've been struggling with sleep for any period of time, you lose your confidence in your ability to sleep. And your brain actually starts to make associations of you being in bed, you anticipating bedtime, you preparing for bed and not being able to sleep, you lying in bed not able to sleep. All these things, your brain is keeping score, and your brain is building up these associations. And that is a really difficult cycle to break. But one of the things, or a few of the things that you can think about is, firstly, only going to bed when you are very sleepy. This is called stimulus control. Only going to bed when you are actually sleepy. And this sometimes sounds counterintuitive because we always think in terms of sleep duration. But only going to bed when you are very sleepy. Think of it like nutrition. Think of it like food. You don't just go and sit at the dining room table and wait to be hungry. You go and sit, unless you're a bodybuilder or maybe you're structuring your meals. But for the most part, the same applies to sleep. Even if it sometimes means you're getting a lesser sleep duration, you're prioritizing the quality and you're prioritizing the associations. Only going to bed when you are actually sleepy and ready for sleep. The second component to that is if you are unable to sleep, and this is happening on a consistent basis, that you're unable to fall asleep or stay asleep, physically get out of bed. As counterintuitive as that sounds, because you continuing to lie there, ruminating about the fact that you cannot sleep, whether that's falling asleep or falling back asleep, is just furthering that association. It's further cementing that in your brain that your bed, your physical bed, is a place for being awake as opposed to being a place of sleep. And so the rule for that is, we call it the 20-20 rule. So if it's 20 minutes or more, you physically get out of bed for 20 minutes. Something low level, reading a book, obviously not going and watching a Netflix special, but something low level. And the last component to that stimulus control, those associations, is keeping your physical bed and bedroom as a place for sleep and sleep only. The way I always phrase it is sleep and sex are the only things that should be done in your bedroom. But we find a lot of people doing everything else. They're watching TV in bed in their bedroom. They are working in bed on their laptop. They're eating in bed. That one's a little gross, but to each their own, right? So really, really trying to create a space where your physical bed and even bedroom are just a haven for sleep, so that your brain starts to associate, it's time for sleep.
And we're going to take a little bit of a pivot because we only have so much time. One of the big things you talked about downstairs when you were having your speech was filler words and words.
Yes.
I think finding the pause is not always the easiest for people, and trying to remove some of those. What are some tips or what are some exercises that you would recommend to the audience out there to be able to get better at that and find that pause?
It's practice, but what I would say when you're starting off pausing is actually having more exaggerated pauses. With all the aspects of speaking in voice, I call it exaggerated exploration before you're worrying about integrating it specifically. So the exaggerated exploration is make it a bit just exaggerated and more than you would think. Sometimes these strategic pauses of 1 to 2 seconds are a lot harder to fit in. Give yourself some cues, even it could be something simple as taking a sip of water when you're speaking, or something that gives you a cue to take a longer, more exaggerated pause. Longer than you think, maybe 3, 4, 5 seconds. And it actually starts to get you more comfortable and familiar with the pause itself. Because if you're able to do it for 3, 4, 5 seconds, doing it 1 to 2 seconds is going to be a lot easier. And then the other thing is starting to think about these pauses as verbal punctuation. Starting to think about this for a lot of people, this can be a helpful way to visualize it. Thinking about these pauses as being your periods. Thinking about these as being a comma before your next point of what you're trying to say. So really thinking about how you use your pauses for verbal punctuation.
One thing I find really interesting on that point when you say that with punctuation, it's like when we speak, we don't like remember, we don't really think about it. It's really like always been grammar. It's always been something we've always read. Like that's how we grew up. That's how we like remember the big speeches, the big memorial things have always been in that specific way. And if we can take that into like the way we're communicating our message, we can keep those things that have stood ground for so many years as like pillars of communication.
For sure.
But sometimes we just get lost in our own brain because our brain thinks so fast and we're trying to get all this thing in.
Yeah, and it's just habitual. It's just habitual of we just become conditioned to speak a certain way, and I find a lot of people put themselves in a mold, and there's a lot of reasons why those molds occur. It's from upbringing. There's a lot of times a cultural influence. It's the people you're around, the situations that you're in, and I don't even think we realize sometimes the mold that this puts us in, and the sometimes unwillingness to change the way we communicate that happens as a result of that. And so being willing to break that mold, and the voice, your voice is a huge component of being able to break that mold. And it's almost, you become a different person. You become a more dynamic person in a lot of ways. I always, when I'm giving my workshops or anything else, I always challenge people to look back to some of the initial podcasts that I was on. Because sometimes there's the tendency too of, oh, it comes more natural for you. You're just a natural speaker. You were just born and it's a little bit easier for you to speak. But I challenge people to look back to some of the initial podcasts that I was on in 2017, 2018. And my voice is completely different. It's almost unrecognizable. So you can change your voice. And when you change your voice, one of the underestimated aspects of changing your voice is the trickle down it has to other aspects of how you communicate. It brings more out of your body language. It brings more emotive meaning and more emotion out of what you're saying. You're able to express yourself better. And so, like I mentioned earlier, it changes not just how you're able to speak in your business and if you're on stage, but it changes how you're able to more effectively communicate in your life as well.
Yeah, and one thing I've noticed about you is, correct me here if you do speak from your stomach or if you speak from your diaphragm, as you've heard singers and things like that, but you could hear that the voice that comes out of your throat or your mouth or whatever we want to call it is powerful. How did you train that? What were some exercises that you did for that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And it is, so volume is one of these foundations that a lot of times people feel that they can't inject more volume. And if they try to inject more volume, they end up straining their voice, or they can't, we call it energizing your sentences. So one of the simplest ways is just building more vocal endurance with your volume, building up more and more endurance. And so something as simple as energizing your sentences, counting 1 to 10. So you basically do 1 to 10, keeping the same consistent energy from 1 to 10. And you do as many cycles of that as you can, until you start to hear your voice cracking or you start to kind of trail off. Because that's one of the things is they can't modulate that power or that volume in their voice. They can get there. Well, some people don't feel they can get there, which you can. Some people, they can get there, but then it trails off. If you've ever heard somebody speaking and they have a lot of energy to start the sentence and then it kind of tails off, right? It starts to tail off. And so being able to energize your sentences, that's one of the first things that any vocal coach, whether it be singing or speaking or otherwise, will teach you, is how to energize your sentences. But in terms of where the voice is coming from, I think it's getting comfortable with all aspects of where your voice is coming from. We call it register, the register in your voice. And so lower register, lower pitch is coming more from the chest. You can almost feel that vibration. And that has a purpose. It can convey, like you said, more power, more confidence, more authority. And there can be a place for that. But to me, being dynamic is the most important thing. So it's also being able to get to higher pitches, higher register, being able to have that contrast that you create. Because you think about it, with all aspects of your voice, it's the contrast that you can create that gives it effect. Because while you say it comes out as power of a voice from the chest and from here, if I'm always speaking that way and I never get to higher pitches or any other variation of pitch and register, then it just becomes my default and it loses its impact. If I'm able to get a little bit higher, but then when I bring it back down, you can use it as a tool to convey that confidence and authority. And this is, we talk about this with all of the aspects of our voice, right? Same goes for rate of speech. If you're able to work to both ends with slowing down and speeding up, now you can strategically slow down your rate of speech to highlight something as being more and more important. Or I can pick up my rate of speech to really get and convey enthusiasm and excitement and passion because I'm able to slow it back down. So it's the most important aspect of all of this is variety. Your ability to create variety and contrast is what allows you to be dynamic.
And as we're running out of time, because I can see
I'm getting the fingers.
Last question for you is, one resource that you've gained a lot of information, a lot of the stuff that you've studied comes from in the terms of speaking. What's been the number one resource that's like impacted what you know and stuff like that, if you've got one.
Yeah, so I think when we talked about this even downstairs, the number one thing for me has just been the self-awareness. That's still the number one thing, because while there are the foundations and understanding of those foundations, you have to understand how you modulate those foundations for yourself. And you have to understand more about yourself as a speaker and a communicator. So record and review is the most valuable tool that you can do. You record yourself speaking for 5 minutes and you listen back, listening to just the audio, so you hear your voice, and you ask others for feedback as well. How does my voice make you feel? What is my voice conveying? Then you watch it on mute, just the body language. What would you say I'm talking about here based on my body language? What would you say I'm trying to get across here with my body language? And then you transcribe it. How many filler words and non-words are there? Is that taking away from the clarity if you were to read it? So record and review is an invaluable tool to implement. To give one person or resource, and he's given a few TED Talks, and he's someone I've taken a lot of things from, and that's David J.P. Phillips. So someone as a good resource to check out would be David J.P. Phillips.
Nice. And like as you said there, to give a little plug in here for where we're at here at the Nucleus Hub, and you're talking about recording, right? And that's what this whole thing has been about. It's been creating this playground for influencers, for speakers, for all of us to just show up. Everything's
get the
here.
reps. Yeah.
Content is given to you. You can study the content, whether you want to put it out or study it for yourself. There's so many different ways and valuable aspects of this content thing. You just got to use it, right?
100%. It's the reps. It's the reps of. But if you don't put yourself out there to create the content, and I mean this is an invaluable setting to be able to do that, because you're getting the professional version of it, so you're seeing it in its full iteration, right?
And the community.
And the community, the support here. I mean, it's a great group. It's a group of like-minded individuals. And what's cool about this, spending so much time just in the fitness industry, there's different backgrounds, there's different perspectives, sure, but they're all still in the fitness industry. And so the nice thing about getting into settings like this is just, we have so many different backgrounds here. We have a luxury concierge, we have a doctor, we have what you do, there's just so many different perspectives and backgrounds, which that is the biggest thing I find in the fitness industry, and actually every industry I find misses the boat on learning from other industries.
The competition of competing with each other gets it afraid to share with each other, and I think I just always, every time I come here, we're always just giving what we are trying and what's working for us. The whole 2 hours that we've been here has been what's working for each person and sharing it. So, and
not holding it back. And that's honestly, man, that's
hard to find.
It's hard to find, and it's because it's hard to find. I feel like any entrepreneur or anybody, you lean into that, it allows you to open yourself up to so much more, because ultimately, that's the mindset you should have with your prospective clients as well. We talk about this all the time with content, and again, more in the fitness industry, but give people your best stuff. Put your best stuff out there. People are going to pay you to say it again, or pay you to say it to them, or say it differently, because you've provided them the real value. This idea and mentality of holding, that's my biggest key point or my biggest takeaway. It doesn't serve anyone, and you're withholding what's the most valuable piece that's out there for you.
One thing that, for me, that it's helped me kind of share more on that same sense there, is recognizing how hard it really is to acquire all this information. And honestly, that's the first step. Yeah. That's the least of it. It's the implementation of that. For sure. So it's why are you gating this information? Share it out there. If somebody has the time, the effort, the willingness to put it in, hey, tip my hat on to them, because it takes a lot. And
here's the thing, when you take information and you start to share it, and you're trying to teach that information to others, you retain 90 to 95% of something when you're teaching it, as opposed to maybe 15% of it if you're just listening to it. If you're practicing it, maybe 70, 75%. But if you're teaching someone else and trying to teach, that is the self-mirror of, do you really understand it? Because one of the things I always highlight with speaking, and this is why speaking is so valuable, there's what you know, then there's what you can communicate, and then I would say you take that even a step further, there's what actually lands with someone else, and what actually gets stuck with somebody and gets them to do something different.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure to talk to you. A pleasure to meet you today. Thank you for all the lessons, and thank you for this moment, man. It has been awesome.
Likewise, man. Great to meet you, and I'm sure we'll connect again. But this has been awesome.
Absolutely.
All right.